if you break
Definitely.
down like hard skills, soft skills, people have problems with those, the words, and everyone's like, aren't
Yeah.
they just power skills or just skills? But hard skills are technical. You know how to use a TMS, you're an Excel or Tableau guru. You know how to cold call, and you've been trained in a very specific process. Soft skills are you're responsible, you're analytical or strategic, you're
Mm.
resourceful and creative. And that's what companies are starting to recognize. I was at a conference with LinkedIn last week, and they shared some data that just blew me away. Um, as of last year, 60% of the jobs that our workforce is in today, 60% of them did not exist in 1940. And
Holy
so,
cow.
yeah, you really have to think about. And then they said something like, okay, so in 10 years, 80% of the jobs that we're in didn't exist in 1940. And then at what point did those jobs not even exist in 2002?
Welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine, and it's my pleasure to have Charlie Saffro, the founder of CS Recruiting, a woman-led and owned logistics and supply chain staffing company. Charlie, welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Thomas. I'm excited to chat.
Me too. Me too. I know you've been making the rounds at a lot of conferences the last couple of weeks, so I appreciate you taking one of your down days to do a podcast with me and to really talk about kind of your background and kind of how CS recruiting kind of came to be. I know a couple of people who work there and absolutely rave about how great the culture is and how great you are overall as a person. So love to kind of dive into some of that and kind of learn about how, just kind of your background and things like that.
Absolutely. No, it is my pleasure. I am big on sharing my story and helping just to support other people in this industry and create awareness that really anything is possible, because this was not my plan. So you just have to know what you're after and follow the path to create something amazing. So where do you want to start?
So you said it wasn't your path. So let's dive into how you, like, what your background is and how you got into the amazing dumpster fire that is freight and logistics and staffing.
Sure. I mean, I guess technically I owe it all to my husband. He was a freight broker right out of college, and this was in the late
Interesting.
90s. Yeah, late 90s. So this was, he was going through a Rolodex. Every time he had a load, he went through and called 100 carriers and came home frustrated. And I started my career actually in marketing and advertising. That is what I went to
Hmm.
college for. I always saw myself working on like the agency side of the business. That's where I started. I was with two agencies in the beginning of my career, and I had my first son. And at this point, my husband, after years of being a freight broker, he ended up creating a technology and starting a business with his brother, which was essentially, I don't want to say it was the first, but one of the very early load boards, online
Awesome.
marketplaces for shippers and carriers to connect. Eventually, they created a brokerage product as well. And after I had my first son, I went back to my advertising job. I loved it, but it was a grind. I was traveling a lot. It was kind of thankless. I was putting my heart and soul into, a single coupon.
Right.
And I just had this wake up call that I loved working. I loved being a working mom, but I wasn't fulfilled by the work I was doing. And so I asked my husband if I could come work at his startup. They had about 8 employees at the time. I said, I will do anything. This was 2006. So for
Hmm.
reference, we still had, paper files and,
Oh yeah.
stapling papers. And I was like, I'll do anything. I just want to be around adults and,
Definitely.
feel a little more fulfilled out of the work I do, but also have more balance in my life to be a mom. So I went to work for him. They had 8 employees. They brought in a partner who was a
Hmm.
CTO and really took their business to the next level. So they had a lot of hiring needs, and they kind of looked around and said, okay, we need to staff up, but you're the only person in the company that even has time to help us hire. So can you figure this out? These were the days of Craigslist, of, making flyers,
Right.
hanging them in libraries and Dunkin' Donuts. But I helped them recruit and truly like taught myself how to recruit with a very limited budget. I had never, even known what a recruiter did, but I kind of just figured it out. I'm helping people get jobs and I'm helping this company hire the right people. So I spent about 4 years there. We grew the business well over 100 employees that I touched every one of them at some part of the process.
Wow.
They sold their business to Internet Truck Stop in 2010, and I stayed on with them just for a couple projects I was finishing. And at this point, I had my third son. So a
Mm,
lot had happened in those years. And I was doing some recruiting projects, and then I started to get inquiries. I give LinkedIn a lot of credit that I was out there as a supply chain logistics transportation recruiter. And I would get inquiries, we need a sales manager. I saw that you know our space. Can you help us?
mm,
Or we need a claims analyst or an ops manager. And so slowly but surely, I started to take on these jobs, and lots of imposter syndrome in the beginning. Like I only knew what I knew and I knew I had taught myself, but I'm a hard worker. And so when these opportunities came my way, I was determined to find these companies, the right people, to grow my network, to put processes in place. And before I knew it, one day CS Recruiting was born. So it was me for about 6 months.
mm.
Got to the point where I needed to hire. It was really just opportunity to grow, to be able to touch more people, do more work. I actually hired my husband as my first employee. He was sitting out his non-compete. I know you can appreciate
That's
that
awesome. Oh
period.
yeah.
And he helped me really just establish the business. And then about a year in, we started hiring for our team outside individuals. So our first hire, Beth, back in 2011, she's still with us today. She'll celebrate 13
Wow.
years with us in January. And that's really the history. We've just grown since then, always very focused on recruiting. In the last 2 years, we've definitely expanded. We do more consultative recruiting, some consulting work, some thought leadership work. But at the end of the day, this is the industry that we're in, and it's a big industry. So there's plenty of opportunity for us to continue to just pave the way here.
Definitely. No, that's a really awesome story, Charlie. And I think that, my next it kind of dovetails into my next question is, you'd mentioned you had been in like the marketing side early on. So did you always see yourself as like an entrepreneur, or what did you, when you were in that like lower position before you had started CS, did you see yourself like potentially building the small empire, big empire that you have today? Did you ever like foresee that happening?
I really didn't, but I did always see myself as an entrepreneur. I mean, it is in
Mm,
my DNA, and I don't think I ever realized how unique it is that both of my grandfathers owned their own businesses. Both of my parents actually own their own businesses. What's unique is that I never wanted anything to do with their businesses. Like their actual service never really just struck a chord with me. But I was always that person. Even in the early days of my professional career, I had a side business. Like when I had my
mm.
first kid, I started making him these little t-shirts, and then my friends wanted them. And so I started selling baby t-shirts. And then I had another little business along the way where I sold, like bags, reusable bags that you could use in
That's
place of
cool.
plastic grocery bags. So I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit, but I've also just been like, I'm just going to keep to myself. I wasn't necessarily doing it for revenue. I was doing it because it kept me busy. It kept me creative. So no, I really never did think it. But when you become an entrepreneur, I think there's a turning point where you realize like, I'm either going to do this and give it 110% and make it what it could be, or I'm going to walk
Yeah.
away because I'm going to fail if it's just me. And that was my turning point. Like it was just too much opportunity. And I didn't want to say no. I truly wanted to be able to help these businesses and help these people. But the only way I could do it was to scale.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like you um, kind of fell into a niche that really was expanding with freight and logistics and continues to expand to in this day and age in 2023.
Mhm.
It's wild how different it probably has been, from when you started it to today, and how when you were helping your husband scale their brokerage, how different like the hiring processes is. The people are how different the cultures have to be, whether that's remote culture, in-person culture. So I think that like it's very interesting how you kind of carved out that niche, and were able to like really expand and grow because you knew so much about freight and logistics already.
Yeah, and it wasn't intentional, which I think is something that I've recently reflected on, is that,
Yeah,
my work in the beginning was just serving my clients and serving my job seekers and representing them, but along the way, I just consumed so much information, so many observations about both sides of the table. I would hear frustrations
definitely.
from hiring managers or executives around, why they're struggling to hire and retain people. And then I'd hear from job seekers, sometimes at that same company, and they were the victims. And so what I've done over the years, again, very unintentionally, but I've kind of made it my own passion, my own obsession to create a company that has a connected culture where our team members feel a
Mm,
purpose. And I've just gathered bits and pieces of like, here's what I'm not going to do, and here's what I'm going to do from all these observations, all these case studies, all these conversations I've had. And so now, I'm at a point where I can give advice. I've always been able to give advice based on my perceptions and what I see and the data and trends. But now my advice is at a different level. Like, I've implemented this and it failed, and this is the lesson I
right.
learned. Or I implemented it and it was wildly successful, and this is the lesson I learned. So just giving a different perspective as a leader, as an entrepreneur.
No, that's fascinating because, like you said, at the beginning stages, it was really just pulling from other people's experiences, right? It was taking a lot of that data and just applying it to, yes, this could work, yes, this might work, no, it won't work. But now you've lived a lot of those experiences, so you can really reflect and tell your story and how it worked, why it failed, or why it worked and why you think it was wildly successful, and then
Mhm.
they can implement whatever it is, or take bits and pieces to really hone in on their strategies, to kind of make things their own, and build on what they're doing. I think that's awesome.
Exactly. You nailed it.
Now, something that a recent statistic that kind of came up was, logistics and freight unemployment is on the rise.
Mhm.
I think it was like, normal average right around like 4% in the freight and logistics industry. It's hovering right around 4.9%. What can you recommend for logistics professionals who are looking to stand out from the crowd and get hired in this tough freight environment?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a tough environment, and it's all cyclical. Like, if there is not freight to
Absolutely.
move, nobody needs the technologies for the freight. Nobody needs to hire people to move the freight. So as
Yeah.
we sit here patiently and just wait for the demand to go back up, which it will, I think the advice I can share is that a lot of companies are getting on the same bandwagon of skills-based hiring. And
Mm,
I can't guarantee that every company is thinking like this, but that's the message out there. That's what, these experts and what the trends and data are showing. And skills-based hiring goes beyond the resume. I mean, certainly a resume is how you're going to get that interview and that connection, but it's hiring the human and really thinking about the soft skills. So if you break
definitely.
down like hard skills, soft skills, people have problems with those, the words, and everyone's like, aren't
Yeah.
they just power skills or just skills? But hard skills are technical. You know how to use a TMS, you're an Excel or Tableau guru. You know how to cold call, and you've been trained in a very specific process. Soft skills are you're responsible, you're analytical or strategic, you're
Mm,
resourceful and creative. And that's what companies are starting to recognize. I was at a conference with LinkedIn last week, and they shared some data that just blew me away. Um, as of last year, 60% of the jobs that our workforce is in today, 60% of them did not exist in 1940. And
holy
so,
cow.
yeah, you really have to think about. And then they said something like, okay, so in 10 years, 80% of the jobs that we're in didn't exist in 1940. And then at what point did those jobs not even exist in 2002? And
Right.
so that's what companies are thinking about, especially like AI as an example.
Mm,
There's companies that are a little bit ahead of the curve. I'm not going to pretend I'm some expert, but like, we're all figuring it out together. So when you hire people that are curious and resourceful and strategic and analytical, and they enjoy the tech side of the business, they're going to be the ones to help you take your AI strategy and do something with it. It doesn't have to be someone who worked at a company in an AI role. Those people
right.
barely exist right now. So I think when these companies lean into skills-based hiring, it gives job seekers a lot more opportunity to just say, like, am I the right human for you? Do I have the right set of shared values? Do I have the right innate strengths that are going to make your company stronger? Will I be an addition to your culture, added value? And that's my advice to those job seekers. I think that the most tactical piece of it is to be your own advocate. And you do that on your
Absolutely.
resume, you do that on your LinkedIn profile. Build in those soft skills anywhere you can. The hardest part about being a job seeker is getting your resume into the hands of the right person, but those people are looking for your skills. So the more you
Mm.
can just weave that in, I am creative, or I'm really good at time management, or I'm very responsible and trustworthy. Like, those are the words that companies are starting to pay attention to on resumes. So I don't have a magic wand to help them get a job, but to at least position themselves to be found, that's probably the first best step they could take.
Definitely. And, with positioning yourself to be found, how important is it right now to develop an online persona, per se, or an online presence within professional networks like LinkedIn? How important is that with logistics professionals right now? Because, like you said, with the market being as down as it is right now, and we all know that, it will come back. So how can some job seekers, I've seen some really good examples of this. Is my friend Matthew Chapa. He's ex FabFitFun, and he was laid off, and he's just leaned into creating content and showing off his knowledge, so that, one, it's a good look for, when people are looking at his resume, they can also see, okay, he started this. Let's go look at kind of what Matthew knows, how he presents himself, and how he can help us within the role he's looking at. So how important is that in 2023 and going forward, for looking at some of these roles?
It's essential. Like, I really think a couple years ago, all of a sudden things just changed. And it was like, the minute you see a resume, you Google that person
Hmm.
and you find the good, bad, the ugly. And we had candidates that got rejected because there were pictures on Facebook of them, partying. Or I remember there's a candidate that had an offer in hand, and then the client Googled them and they had pictures on their Facebook, like, leaning over a toilet at a frat party and
Oh
just making
boy.
fun of themselves. But, like, you have to know that's the world we live in, and people are going to judge you, whether,
Yeah.
not saying I judged him, but there's a perception. And is this the right person? Especially if you have two or three people being considered for the job, that may very well be the deal breaker. But
Hmm.
on LinkedIn, it's a necessity these days. Like, and it's in the job seeker's benefit. It shouldn't be a chore that you have to go create a LinkedIn profile now. Like, it is your opportunity to show who you are behind your resume. It's your chance through, whether you post content once a year or every day, for these decision makers to get to see that human side of you. And, oh, Tom has a dog, or Tom likes the Bulls. Like, now I know
Yeah.
right away we're going to have something to talk about in that first interview. So I think it's essential to have a profile. That profile should be your resume, but it should go beyond your resume and touch on who you are as a person. And then if you have any, interest in posting content, sharing articles, whatever else you do is just going to enhance that persona of who you are. And hopefully, it will attract the right companies. It may detract some companies, but the goal is that you're finding a company that wants you for who you are and aligns with the values that you share publicly.
How often are you seeing, I know, you just touched on this and it may detract from certain employers. How often are you seeing um, freight and logistics companies not leaning into their online presence and having their employees have an online persona that helps, amplify their business? I was talking to Jen from TMSA the other day on
Mhm.
the podcast, and we were talking about this a bit as well, and in how you don't want to have those certain images out there, like you were alluding to, frat parties in a toilet. But why do you think some of these businesses are not leaning into their employees having that online presence and online persona?
I think there's fear, and it's
Mm,
it's rightfully so, because there's fear that, what if these employees say the wrong thing or post something that
absolutely.
actually goes against our company values, and now they're, promoting our logo and it's attached to their
Mm,
profile. But I also think it's a lot of heavy lifting. I mean, I know our team, we put a tremendous amount of work into training our team on LinkedIn, here's how you're going to, suggestions. We are never giving them a
Definitely.
template and saying this is what you need to say, but here's some suggestions on how to enhance yourself. Like, they're selling themselves. They want job seekers to want to come and say, I want to work with you specifically at
Absolutely.
recruiting because of what you stand for, because I saw you have a dog or you have kids or whatever it is. But it's a lot of work. I mean, we don't give our employees necessarily guidelines like here's what you can and can't talk about, but we give them fodder. And if we're
Mm,
creating some marketing materials, like, hey, share this with your network, here's 5 tips to help job seekers nail their interview, like, we're giving it to our team so they can put it out there and then they can add their commentary. I think a lot of companies are just they don't see that value. They don't believe that because it's hard to measure an ROI
definitely.
because it's organic. So companies don't see the value, they're scared, and that just comes down to, like, did they even hire the right people if they don't trust those people to share their
Yeah.
voice? And also having some formal training or some formal guidelines
Mm,
on what they can be talking about or what they can be sharing. And I think it also, companies think like, if we help our employees enhance their profile, aren't they just going to get recruited away? And maybe, I mean, and I'm very aware of that with my team members, but my goal is to help them be the best version they can be while they're with us. And if they take some of that with them, go make a difference in this world and use what we taught
exactly.
you even better.
Yeah, and then that person, I mean, no matter what, if they leave your company and they leave and, they had a good experience with you, they're always going to be a good advocate for
Exactly.
your company. They're never going to, like, if you hold them down and try to, for lack of a better term, clip their wings and not let them be free to kind of do what they want, or have some kind of freedom of reign to say, hey, like, I know what I'm doing, and I want to be able to attract certain types of customers. A lot of customers are moving to social media. They're looking at social
Mhm.
media. So it's just kind of moving kind of with the times. And like you said, it's having those kind of those best practices in place to talk to your employees. I think there's a lot of companies that do this very well. You guys are one of them. You guys
Thank you.
really stand out from doing that. Freightways is another. They have a lot
Mhm.
of good outside voices that aren't just their media presence. A lot of the Sonar sales reps. I worked there for a good while, and their internal want for everyone to succeed and everyone to grow is absolutely amazing, and they want those voices out there, and
Exactly.
they empower you to speak what you think, and back it up with whatever you can, whatever data or whatever analysis you can obviously back it up, and talk talk the talk, walk the walk. So I think that's a very interesting point.
And it's not saturated yet. I mean, like, one company
Yeah.
that comes to mind, and this is not a plug, I like them, but we don't do business with them, is Freight. Like, they do a great job,
Yeah.
and like, there's plenty of space for other companies to kind of hop onto that ship and
Hmm.
start doing it. But I'd say there's way, way, way more companies that are probably either discouraging it or just ignoring it than actually embracing it. So this is it, and you're exactly right. Like, having these employee advocates is not only a retention strategy, but it's also a recruiting strategy. People are going to want to work for your company. I mean, when I started and started building my team, it was so hard to hire. We were nobody, like, it
Yeah.
was a risk. You guys are a startup. Why should I trust, why am I going to leave my job to come work for a company I've never heard of? And now we have, people knocking on our door wanting to work here because of that. And that's what companies need
Yeah.
to realize, is like, that is a recruiting strategy right there. Just getting those employee advocates.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest, like, whenever I see someone on your team make a post, it just seems so genuine. It seems like everyone is enjoying what they do. It's not like a forced post. It's not it just doesn't feel that way. It feels like they're speaking what they want to speak about, how they want to speak about it. And you guys, don't hold them back from that. And you guys really empower them to do that. And I think that's really awesome. I think more companies need to lead like that, and,
Thank
and
you.
show that, like, it's really a valuable tool, to do that. I think you guys really helped, like, show that roadmap of like, this is okay to do. This is going to enhance your business. It's not going to detract. And you may have, I'm sure over the years you've had people that have posted content you didn't like, or it may have happened and maybe it hasn't, but
Mhm.
those situations are going to arise regardless of if you're letting your people be advocates or not. So
Yep.
I think it's just having those best practices in place and really being able to just kind of lean into the social media age we live in.
Exactly. That's all we can do is give them the best practices. And when I speak out, it's usually my own opinion. It's not this is what CS recruiting thinks. So
Exactly.
and it's what's also really cool is it's become a way I communicate with my team. Now, my
Hmm.
team is not finding out anything for the first time on LinkedIn, but they say, people need to hear something 7, 8 times before it sticks. So if we're, announcing that we're closing, on a Friday for an employee appreciation day, like we say it in our status meeting, it goes on an email, but then it's on LinkedIn 10 times. Like
Yeah,
my team is like, oh, okay, she really means this. Like this
that's
is
awesome.
public now. So same thing with praise. Like I can praise someone one off. We can do a company email, announcing some sort of win or success. But then when you put it out there in public, like that feels really good to them. And it's just another way, like that surround sound idea of continuing to promote our wins, but also promote our values and what we stand for.
Yeah, touching on that, you guys do show, and I see it. A lot of companies don't have the founder and CEO of the company posting about a CSR or an account rep for their anniversary, right?
Hmm.
You don't see them posting about happy birthday. So, and
Hmm.
that's something that really stands out is you guys go above and beyond with showing it's not just internal love, internal care. You're showing it online. You're showing it on your personal profile. You don't just like talk the talk. You really walk the walk of being obsessed with your people, obsessed with culture. Let me ask is why are you so obsessed with culture?
Because it is the secret to success. Like I
Hmm,
really believe that if you are in any business, product or service, but our industry is mostly services, we are only as
definitely.
good as our people. And there's two areas of thought out there and there's quotes to back it up, but there's an entrepreneur out there, his name is Derek Silvers, and he
Hmm,
has a quote something about like the best businesses are obsessed with their customers. I totally agree with that, but then if you look at a quote JW Marriott put out there, and he says the best businesses are obsessed with their employees. I'm in
yeah,
that camp because I
I agree with
know
that.
that when we obsess over our people and we think about the purpose and the connection and the recognition, they will deliver a good service. Our clients will enjoy working with us. They'll come back. That leads to profits. If we just focused on the customer, our customers are not always right. I will tell you
I
that we've
agree.
learned that the hard way, and sometimes we've had to protect our team, and we earn more trust and respect from our team when we like break up with a client that has
Hmm,
treated us poorly or treats our placements poorly, just to show that again, like yeah, we walk the walk and talk the talk. So, and I think culture leads to recruiting and retention, and that's where I'm an expert. That's what I know, and
definitely.
you can go out there and offer a really high salary and get a rock star. But if that person isn't happy, they're not going to be productive. If they're not productive, they're going to not make it.
Hmm.
And it all feeds into that same recruit to retain, retain to recruit. And it's just this continuous cycle.
And it goes to show like you've really taken that experience and taken those words to heart because like you started the episode with your first hire was Beth 13 years ago and she's still on the team.
Mhm.
So she I'm sure that she is the feels the love, feels the same way and is obsessed with culture because that's just kind of the way you guys it's just kind of like your breeding ground, right? Like you guys
Mhm.
are obsessed with culture and making it kind of your identity, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a really awesome thing. And how so that'll kind of segue into kind of like my next question is how can freight and logistics companies um, how can they attract the top end talent that really wants to stay? I know culture is going to be one of them, but how do they go about creating that culture? Everyone talks about culture and whether that's sports, whether that's in freight logistics, but
Yeah.
not everyone knows how to create that culture and how to go about helping people win and have those successes. How would you say for, some of the smaller brokerages or smaller carrier groups that are starting out or trying to scale their operations? How can they become obsessed with culture, and how can they start with, building that culture?
It's a great question, and we could probably have like an 8 hour conversation about it. But
Definitely.
I'll walk you through like how we approach some of our like our thought leadership consulting. And
Please.
I think the first step is recognizing that, there are certain things employees are looking for before they join a company, and then
Mm.
things that they look for to make a decision to either stay or leave that company. So there's 15 different categories there. An idea of those is compensation is something that's important. The leadership is important. The advancement opportunities, the flexibility of the organization. So 15 different things. And when we consult with clients, we usually start with the leader or the leadership team, and we ask them to
Mm.
rank each category. So 1 through 5, like how strongly do you feel that your compensation is in line with what your employees want to join and to stay? And then we really encourage them to think about that section and break it down. So when you look at your benefits, your bonuses, your, different ways of motivating people, obviously how you compensate from a salary standpoint, what are you really good at? And then take a really hard look at what you're not good at, because there is some
Absolutely.
competitor that does it better than you in every place. And then as we go through these 15 things, we kind of come to this assessment of like, yeah, we could prioritize all 15, but here are the 3 that are going to make the most impact the quickest. And then we dive into those, and we usually will do like a series of workshops, or,
Mm.
maybe it's just with the leadership team or the full company, but it's building it like a puzzle. So, if a company really felt like they lacked on flexibility, then we would dive into that with them and understand like, what are you currently doing to promote flexibility is really just trust. So
Yeah,
do your employees
100%.
feel trusted? Part of this, and not all companies are brave enough to do this, but the right way to do it is to measure your team and to survey them, and do they feel trusted, and do they feel flexible, and what are you doing tactically to support that? And then after we've really discovered like, this is how the leader feels, this is how the team feels, here's the strategy of what needs to happen, but here's 5, 6 tactics that you can do. And it's not just work from home. Like when I talk about
Right.
flexibility, that's not the be all end all solution, work from home or hybrid. It's, different scheduling softwares, different, recognition to appreciate when somebody maybe had a sacrifice because of work. So there's all these little things, and it's not an overnight thing. It's looking at all 15 categories and really breaking down, all right, these 5 are good. We'll revisit them in the future, but these are the 5 we really need to work on. We really need to have very open, honest conversations, and then actually figure out what work we need to do.
Definitely.
Usually it's to enhance the culture. Sometimes it's just to maintain it. And sometimes it's to completely change it. Um, and my advice is, if you are an established brokerage, you probably have values. If you don't have values, that is by, all means, that's your first step. Go out and
Yeah.
figure out your company values. But think about those values, and think about, and we struggled with this as a company a couple years ago. We had values, but they didn't mean anything to anyone because we barely talked about them, and we didn't really like back them up.
Mm.
And so we rewrote our values in 2018 and made just a huge commitment to like, everything we do, we're like, oh, that connects to that value, and we're going to shout that out that way, or this connects to this
Mm.
value, so let's really, do X, Y, and Z to support it and make sure the team knows. And I'd say that's probably the easiest way to explain culture is, do you have values that really represent who you are as a company, and what do you do tactically and strategically to support those values? So that would be my advice, is look at your values and think about, if your value is trust, do you actually trust your employees? Are you just saying you trust your carriers? Do you trust your customers? And what actions are you taking to really back that up? But
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of companies think that, a $25 Amazon gift card and a pizza party twice a year is building culture, right? I mean, I worked for companies like that who there's no raises. If you want to raise, go sell more. Here's a pizza party once a quarter. Thanks for your hard work, and it's enough pizza for every person have one slice of pizza. It's an awful time. Everyone hates it.
Yeah.
And I think that you're spot on with, if you say you trust your people, back that up, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of ways. Basically, if you're going to sit here and say we're a people first organization, and you're forcing your employees, if they're remote or work from home, on 6 hours of video calls to make sure they're working all day,
Exactly.
probably not the way to show that you trust your employees, right? But it just goes to having those values, having those in place, and actually being able to tie all of what you're doing back into those values and how you treat your people, and just back up what you're saying, and just not be,
Yeah.
basically, just don't be a hypocrite.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean that's like a perfect example of it's really uncomfortable, and my team had to push me to even accept like this type of practice. But there have been years where, like, if we normally do a summer outing, let's say, and we've got this budget and we go on a boat and we do all this stuff and everyone walks away with a sweatshirt, and then one year we're struggling and we have, $50 ahead is what we can spend. We have surveyed our
Yeah.
team and said, would you rather have $50 in your pocket, or would you rather have a day where we come together and it's going to be informal, but we're going to get together at a restaurant and have pizza and beer and just hang out? And what I have to accept as a leader is it's never 100% in one way or the other. Like, everyone's
Yeah,
going to
definitely.
differ, but when I can see how the team feels, usually people want to hang out.
Yeah,
Because of the way we position it. Now, if I
definitely.
said you want $5,000 or hang out, like, take the money. But
Oh yeah.
it's like we're very transparent with our team in that sense. Like, we're not just going to pretend that this is going to be the way it's always been. Like, this year, this is the situation and we want to satisfy you. Our goal is to keep our people connected, and the best way to do that is to get together. But if you really are going to feel connection and appreciation through a $50 bill, then maybe that's the route we take this year. And it's uncomfortable as a leader to have to admit that, because of course we want to throw, grandiose
Absolutely.
events where everyone is remembering it and bragging about it. But I think that's what leaders need to do, is just to be open and honest, and to really think about what's going to give us the most bang for our buck here. And it's not about what you think, it's about what the team wants and needs right now.
I think that really goes, kind of as we wrap up here, Charlie. I know, something you just said is, it's hard as a leader to admit that, right? To say that, like, hey, we can only spend, last year I know we had a lavish event, but this year we can't. And
Hmm.
I think it goes, putting your own ego aside, and just saying, hey guys, like, this year kind of sucked, and you guys have done a great job, but this is what we can do. I think that really shows a lot more than just like throwing some random event, or you're asking your people's opinion because you've built a culture that is obsessed with that wants
Hmm.
feedback, that wants everyone's opinion, and wants everyone to feel involved and included. So I think that it just, from the top down, it really shows that you guys really do embrace that. And I think that a lot more leaders should be like that. When I was at Freight Waves, Craig was the same way. He would share the wins, he would share the losses, and
Love
he would
that.
tell us what was going on, because he was very much about, I don't want my people to be in the dark or caught off
Mhm.
guard if things are not going well, or if things are going great. We want to share in that success, and share in how great we are doing. So I love that, you guys are like that, and there's other companies out there that really are not just, you know, on the outside showing, hey, we're great, we have this great culture, but you guys really do. And it really goes to show in how you guys operate, how your employees are, and how you talk today on the podcast, and really, opened up about how you guys operate. And I really love that. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to just share the story, because again, it's education. It's
Absolutely.
showing other leaders that it is uncomfortable, but I promise that if you focus on your people, you will come out ahead. And there's a good opportunity to come out ahead of the competition right now, just by focusing on people, being genuine and authentic about it.
Yeah,
And really, I'm not saying do that so you can go promote it, but if you do that, it will be promoted, and that will drive not only, you know, more success with recruiting and retention, but more success with the customers you serve, the partners you have, because they'll want to work with a company that's, you know, when your employees feel that way, it's an obvious impact.
No, I completely agree. And, you know, we'll kind of end on that, Charlie. I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to the audience and talk to me about, you know, your experiences, what you've built at CS Recruiting. Where can people check you guys out online? Where can people find your content and CS Recruiting?
Naturally, I'll send them back to LinkedIn. So follow me on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, I can't make any more connections. I've tapped out, but I can follow you back. We can communicate. And I'm happy to put you in touch if you're looking to hire. We're happy to put you in touch with a team member and talk more about our process. If you're a job seeker looking for a new opportunity or just wondering what your value is, reach out and I'm happy to connect you to a recruiter on my team.
Awesome. And we'll have all those links down in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the description. If you guys like today's podcast, make sure you guys like and review it so that we can keep having awesome guests like Charlie on the show to share their awesome stories. And don't forget to check out the weekly newsletters. Those drop every Monday and Wednesday, thinkfreight.io. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Thomas.